You started the business with your wife as well. What was that experience like in that partnership?
She had an idea that she'd come in and manage, hiring and maybe some marketing and schmoozing the patients and really business development and accounting and all that admin side. And she ended up doing billing. And funny enough, you bring up billing, and she ended up doing billing for a long time. So it was a dream of hers to go into something that was not billing, clearly. And then she went into it because of sheer necessity.
Vinod, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We want to take it back to the start, right? So you studied exercise science, you played baseball. Tell us about your early days.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in New York, and I played baseball for sure for a long time. So I was more inclined towards sports as a kid, and I grew up on the streets of New York, so it was a lot of just pickup games and stuff like that. But, as I kind of moved through, my interest in baseball, my family wasn't too pumped about that, right? They wanted me to, immigrant parents wanted me to become a doctor, engineer, lawyer, something like that. And ultimately, doctor was where my dad wanted me to go, and I wanted to go baseball. But how that came together ultimately was just learning about the body, interested in injuries and so forth, because it just was part of being an athlete, trying to learn how to be better at it. So that's kind of how the initiative toward being a physical therapist kind of started a little bit. And then it ultimately went to just observation. And then I was like psycho excited about physical therapy. Like I was way over the top. Like, in the coloring books, you'd see the anatomy coloring books. I took a medicine class in high school. And, when you color, you obviously do the outline of the body and all the muscles. And it just was something I just loved, I was super pumped about.
Yeah. And I guess you loved it to the point where you started your own group, ReddyCare. And that was about 20 years ago at this point.
It's 22 years.
Wow. What inspired you to go and do that?
So when I got out of physical therapy school, I just was I don't know how to say this. I was just so pumped about being a therapist, so excited about everything we do. The schooling was great. I got everything I wanted to get out of it, so I was like really excited. I worked for a group at the time that was doing a little more volume based of a model. And naturally as a new graduate, I was kind of like, man, there's got to be a little more to this, in terms of like knowledge that I learned in school that I can't apply today. And I was like, it might be a good idea for me to start my own practice. I mean, ahead of that was, actually behind that was the fact that I always wanted to be in private practice, have clinics. I volunteered over 2,000 hours before I actually went into school. So I saw like, 8 or 9 different private practices. And I remember walking into my first one and being like, dude, I'm like, this is the best. It's something about it. I still can't put a finger on it. The 4 walls, the windows, the patients, the tables, the therapists, the laughs, the patients getting better. I think ultimately it was really just seeing the patient's recovery week after week after week. And I was like, man, you get paid to do this? Like, this is like who does this, So inherently for me, it just was like a very just awesome Disney World-ish kind of place to be. I mean, that's probably exaggerating the word Disney World, but it was right there, like where I was really pumped up being in the clinic. So I was like, I want to have my own. So it just happened to be that way, I think, at the end of the day.
And what's so interesting is, I think this story we hear of why you went into it, I think resonates a lot with, I think, folks listening or what we've heard from. But you are quickly faced with the reality of billing and coding and administrative work. And what were some of the early challenges you saw as you started building out your business?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a big part of it, Hirsch, just the billing. I remember doing the billing myself in an old system and like plugging and punching in numbers. And I was like, this sucks. This is not exactly fun, And I remember getting the denials in but overall, I think it's marketing the practice, it's establishing, your accounting features, how do you pay people, hiring, A lot of my focus in the beginning was marketing. I had a fairly good understanding that in order to make it in New York, in like the tri-state area, you'd have to stick out a little bit. So a lot of it was around that. And a lot of it was going really hard and learning how to be a better therapist too. That was a big deal. I really just studied on my own. We didn't have really much YouTube action then to like learn things, but I studied everything. I got my hand on every book. I bought advanced books, anatomy books, and I would just study all the time, like every single day, in work, outside of work. If I was on a trip or something, or I took a flight for a conference, I didn't really have any vacations in the beginning, but I was really into just making sure that I was always learning and just putting pieces together and asking questions. I had great mentors too that I found. I called everybody, the guys, people that know me, I found them. So I think a lot of it was clinical, but I mean, to your point, you go with what's familiar to you, what's easy to you. And I think clinical was that, but the billing was, forget about it. I didn't want to talk about compliance. I mean, that was another story, I had no idea. And documentation was like, we were doing it on paper, and I know paper can't fly, but sometimes those papers were like not to be found. It was really a wild experience, looking back.
Yeah. And you started the business with your wife as well. What was that experience like in that partnership?
I thought it was really good. I mean, she had studied at Brewer College, getting her MBA, and she had came out of school looking to work possibly for a nonprofit in New York and be an executive there. And I was like, why don't you come and help me help this grow a little bit, and I could use your help here. And she's like, well, I don't know, I could come. And she had an idea that she'd come in and manage, hiring and maybe some marketing and schmoozing the patients and really business development and accounting and all that admin side. And she ended up doing billing. And funny enough, you bring up billing, and she ended up doing billing for a long time. So it was a dream of hers to go into something that was not billing, clearly. And then she went into it because of sheer necessity. So that was a big impact. I would say more of an adverse impact in our young lives as we grew together and we got married. We were engaged my first year in practice, in my practice. And then we got married, like 2 years or a year and a half later. So it was interesting to kind of go through the process and evolve together in it. But, anyway, I think she could have probably done some better stuff for us than billing.
Well, you've scaled really impressively. I think today you have a staff of close to 300 and an incredible footprint in the tri-state region. What are some of the strategies that have helped you scale? I think initially you spoke about getting your name out there and some of the marketing, but your latter phase of growth to where you are today.
Yeah, I think the pairing of marketing and HR and the clinical development side has always been the key pearls or the cornerstones of how we go forward. Learning how to employ the right people, learning the criteria that fit for your culture and what your team is defined by are huge parts of it. The marketing space has changed so much over the years, right? When we were initially starting off, it was a lot of door-to-door marketing with physicians. It was, I forget the name of I think it was called Local Reach, actually. I don't know if they're around anymore, but they were like the first like sort of Google, SEO kind of play. So we were doing these things in the beginning just to kind of build our name up. A lot of it was core based around meeting physicians, understanding what their needs were, treating the patients really, really well. So I think we've evolved that silo, or that's the aspect of the business, along with HR. And as time has gone on, especially now more so, it's really finding the right partners, the right systems in place to kind of help grow and keep your footing in the place. And focus I think a lot of it too is also just learning how to become a manager, executive, whatever, owner, whatever you want to call it, and identifying the key areas you need to be in and out of. If you stay too far in one area and you kind of like are hanging in there and hobby horsing in there, you're going to get screwed, for lack of a better word. So you got to be able to be nimble and move around and learn what it's like to really be at that level, that tier, as you grow your company. Otherwise, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah. And what are some of the more interesting or effective ways you've thought about marketing as it relates to the patient outreach or things, or maybe just even feedback or advice you'd have for the folks listening?
Yeah, I think some of the main things are really establishing great relationships with and meaningful relationships with referral sources. If it's a social worker that refers you patients, a physician, I know people kind of get a little bit hung up on the idea that you can't, but it takes time. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes thought, and really developing good relationships with people there. You should have somebody who's doing marketing, right? People lose a little bit of sight around, from a small practice, just a 1 location or 2 location practice. They're like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to get into having an employee that markets. They kind of look at it. And then the question is, if they have an employee that markets, do they hire an employee that has marketed before? And what do they bring to the table? And we've experienced that too, where you get a guy or a gal who's marketed, pharmaceutical sales, compound pharmacy, so whatever you want to call it, and the performance for physical therapy doesn't correlate. So you have to know about how to go do it. So my suggestion to people, again, a lot of this is groundwork kind of stuff, not groundbreaking, is learn it yourself, go out and market, speak to physicians, and then try to get people to understand that's a process. You could hire a therapist to do that, PTA, an occupational therapist, a CODA, or you could hire somebody as a non-clinician to go out and represent your company. But finding a strategy for them to win, for them to do well with the growth of the practice is another big thing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of simplicities there. I hope that answered your question with,
it does. And I'd say on the flip side of the coin, as it relates to patients, how do you think about educating the community on the value of PT, the value of coming back? I think it's one of the most underutilized services out there. I truly do. And we look at the folks we partner with, I think they feel the same as well. But I'm curious how you deal with the patient education side of things.
Yeah. Being a rehab specialist in the field we're in has a lot of bandwidth, actually. If you go everything from athletes that are injured, ask you questions about weight management, who ask you about what happens after I'm done, what do I do, all the way through to geriatrics and so forth. So I think a lot of it is understanding first that you have a lot of bandwidth and discussion and learning a lot of stuff. So take your courses and learn about that as a therapist. And then, letting the community know through podcasts or marketing materials or workshops or events or health fairs, different things like that, where you can go out to the community, get the therapists out there talking about things. If there's a senior center, do a balance screen, do a fall prevention seminar, field questions about, you're going to have that question and the person will say, hey, I would be much better balanced if I could see better. And you're like, okay, well, what's that all about? Have you had, your inner ear checked, or have you, if an athlete's talking about their weight, have you consulted somebody about diet, et cetera? And so there's a lot of ability to go into different areas of health that are related to the wellness space that therapists could take advantage of. I think it's a broad space, but I think that allows you to educate on different levels, and the platforms we have now between, LinkedIn, Instagram, et cetera. You could go out and talk about all these things and within the scope of your practice, obviously, but there's an opportunity there for the public to really see that we can be, as healthcare providers, professionals, really, really competent and able to talk about a lot of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope to build software and tools that help do that as well. If we take a step back and think about specifically on the billing side, what was your tip of the iceberg moment where you realized that you had to make a change?
Yeah, I think this is a conversation I had recently with somebody at Athalis. I think it was Gray that we talked this about. Actually, it was Gray Hoffman here. And he asked me the same kind of question. And I said, I didn't know it until after it was done. I really didn't know it. There was a point where I was super stressed, and I kept going back to just revenue cycle. And I just said, it can't be revenue cycle. Our average reimbursement is blah, or, I know we're co-paying. I know we're collecting these co-payments. I know we're doing these things, but what's happening? What's going on? So the stress level went away, diminished significantly enough after being on Athalis for about, 3-4 months. And at that point, after 3 or 4 months, I noticed that, whoa, like I'm a little bit more at ease. I feel like I have a little more control, because that's the point of it, right? When your rev cycle is a little bit off control and you're not sure, that as a business owner is like, whoa, like, do you really want to experience that? Like, you can experience a lot of things, but if something is not paid and you're not sure, or you're looking at your platform that you're currently using and you're like, man, I don't really know. Is it there? And you're dependent on all these people, and it's not, and they're dependent on the platform, and the platform is not producing data that could be extracted quick enough for them to give you an answer. Now you can't be a business owner, because money don't come from, my parents tell me all the time, it doesn't fall from trees, man. It's like, you need to know the data. So I think that was, the moment that where I think a lot of I was like, oh, wow, this is like, my stress level is down a lot. So my tip of the iceberg kind of came to recognition 4 months in, but I think I was standing at the tip of the iceberg for a few years, and I have a ton of endurance. I could take a good old fashioned beating, a mental beating, for a long time. I've always been able to do that as a part of being, I guess, either a business owner or the way I was raised or whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh, I think in many ways, to get the business to where you are today, you need that. And so, I think my guess is there's no way that you can scale if you didn't have that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, really happy to hear that stress level has gone down. And I think especially when you're looking to scale a business, this is probably the last thing you want to think about, right? It's like, why didn't I get paid on this one specific claim or these series of claims? You want to think about scaling your business, right? And so we're sort of happy we can help you there. On that point, were there times or were there cases where you thought, hey, it didn't make sense to do this? You're thinking of selling the practice. Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, all the time. It's I think part of it is when you get to some scale, you do get calls. You do get interest. And there's a lot of things you do really well. And it's something you look at those 5 things minus the 2 things, one of which you guys have excelled at helping us with. You look at your 5 things or whatever you want to call it that you're really good at. You say, I could offer this to somebody else, and I could sell this business and make money and do something else, right? And it takes a little bit of like looking really deep and saying, well, is that a good move or not? Yeah. Regardless of money, regardless of what it is. So I think we know where my stance is on that at this moment and also going forward. But so there's been a lot of temptation over the years.
Yeah. That is something we consistently hear time and time and time again, right? You get to a critical mass or a critical point, and then you have all your options open for you, and then you make your decision. And so we feel fortunate in the partnership. And then as it relates to PTs and sort of your staff members, and as you think about burnout and folks leaving the field, what's your read on that? Are you seeing a little bit more of that recently? Has that kind of always been the case? Love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question, Hirsch. I mean, I think that burnout inherently is it's partnered directly up with lack of knowledge or information or ability to make quick decisions. And then it comes with workload that you should expect to do in X amount of time. Now it's taking you X times 2 or 3. And then there comes all the glory of what you see the other guy doing, right? Like I go on social media and this therapist is doing this and this guy's doing that. And, you get lost a little bit in all of this. And I think that's a risk for a lot of people. But to answer your question, I do think therapists are extremely hardworking individuals. And patient care and patient decision-making is extremely challenging at times for a lot of providers. I think the more you learn, the better you become equipped. And, for us, certainly this partnership has been on a huge level, effective in terms of getting focused, right, on what really matters, which is ultimately going to be clinical care, right? Can you make decisions that are going to drive your course of events going forward for these patients as they live longer and have better quality? Not to get into a quality care conversation, but I think the more you enjoy that aspect of what you do in life, no matter what you do, you're going to eventually feel better about it when you look back. I always tell my my therapist, I'm like, man, when you're 80 years old and you look back, the technology the way it is right now, you're going to know every single one of your patients potentially that you've seen and their outcomes potentially. It might be not like it would be published in a public area, but you may have inclination towards some of the data that could be available for you. So you might have the viewpoint that you've treated X amount of patients and gotten them this far with what you do. And that's really rewarding, for anybody doing anything they're doing.
Yeah. And so how do you think about retention, and how do you think about what can leaders or yourself or your leaders do to ensure that you're retaining the top talent at your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to go back. I think we are a little bit prone toward looking at the shiny objects in the sky. And when we go back to the fundamentals of the business are going to always be around exactly where they are right now. Is you have a payer mix, you have a patient, and you have staff. And when you look at the three of those together, you try to make those come together in a way where it makes logical sense, right? You get paid effectively for what you do. You have a good interaction with your staff, where the staff finds value in meeting what they do. And then ultimately, as a company, you're trying to take all these items and bring it together and share with them that this is more progressive and a better option for them. I think in terms of better options for us, we're a privately owned company. So, I could have a phone call with any one of my employees tomorrow and go over issues, the things that come up. And those individuals not only drive the benefits to the patients, and which then leads to the marketing, which then leads to their telling their friends and family and their physician. It comes back the other way, where we can make decisions about the company now and make it effective to create a company that's more beneficial for them, right? Like we're doing with you guys, with Athelis. I mean, it's like we're actually creating a technology that it actually is fitted for the, therapist. I don't want to use cliche terms, right? Yeah. But, if you compare that to more of a corporate setting, a larger corporate setting, the thought process isn't going to always be driven around that user, right? So we're trying to build that around the user in this platform. And then also in terms of things that we can do for our staff, I mean, you want to, as a leader, you want to be able to show them that you can do the things that anybody else can do, but you have more of an interaction that's more genuine to the practice and to the source of the practice. Because at the end of the day, you can treat patients wherever you go. You're going to do the admin wherever you go, and you're going to be involved with it, right? So I think as that goes on, all the other glit and glam of things will chill out, and you go back to the basics, right, of what you do. So we want to channel the basics, make it really good, make it an effective environment for people to do well and thrive and use their minds and create. And, again, that's one of the major goals for us, clinically, administratively, even some therapists who want to do marketing, we want to take those facets of the business and let them run with it.
Yeah. And let them scale their impact as well. Do you have any maybe one or two stories at the top of your head where, you've had a therapist that has said, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z to make sure they're fulfilled, like you spoke about, or allow them to build new skills and really make them feel excited to work with you? Any stories you can share there?
Yeah, funny enough, we have a story right now with Josh, who came with us on this trip to Athelis. Our team is here today, and he called my HR director about a week and a half ago, and he was like, hey, I've been with the company for about a year and a half now, I think it's about a year now. Actually a year. I remember talking to him, interviewing him literally in August of last year. I remember exactly where I was at. And he said, I'd like to just get my feet underneath me a little bit, and then, I want to do more. And when we asked him what he wants to do more, he's like, well, I told him about Athelis at the time, and he was like, that'll be great. And he called us a week ago, literally a week or two before his anniversary of his decision to work with us. And he's like, you know what, I want to do something. And I was thinking, it'd be great for him to be involved in this back end process so he could educate therapists on this new technology we're using, and be at a very young age and a young time in his career with us, have an impact. And he was like, yeah. I'm like, how about you come down to Athelis with us? And he's like, give me a couple hours, give me a day, I'll check my schedule, and then boom, he was on board. So I think that's a pretty aggressive approach for a guy who's been with the company for a year and been out of school for about a year to kind of throw him right into it a little bit. I wouldn't say we're throwing him into it. He's meeting and it's pretty well established, and you guys are very super organized about everything. But I'm very proud. Like I was sitting here in the meeting and seeing his experience. I could almost live through his eyes, and see like, man, this has got to be really cool to be able to be here. Just be here and just experience all this, the evolution of the field, the evolution of health. So that's been a great story. And I've had therapists who've been with me for a very long time, who started off as technicians and helped me out administratively in school. Stephanie is one of our clinical director in Great Neck, our main office. And she kind of always said, hey, very early on, I do want to be the person here. I want to be the cheese in this community. And I was like, okay, great. And, sometimes when you meet people, you can't vision 20 years later, 15 years later, what they're going to be like. You may have a different vision for them because you might think they might have X quality or B quality or whatever. And I was like, you know what? Okay. I get it. And I just we hung together through PT school, through different changes. And, she started with me in 2008 actually. And she's still there running the clinic, and doing it. And, sometimes I look back, I'm like, what drove her to be part of this mechanism or my company or like I'm telling you the story, like what drove it? And it's a commitment, it's a communication, it's a relationship, and like she's known my daughter since she was born, like she knew my first dog, my first like dog that I had as a married couple. She was there when he was a puppy. He's passed since, but I mean, a long time now, almost, 15, 16 years of time. So anyway, those are kind of two good stories, I'd say.
Yeah. And almost on like opposite ends as well, right? Like a new joiner and someone who's been with you for a while. And, I truly believe that if you give folks a chance to go work on something new or even if they're early in their career and you bet on them, I think you see these like incredible outcomes. And I'm sure with Josh, you'll see that we're excited to work with him as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. I have a few more questions on my end. As you guys think about delivering care, and really thinking about the patient outcomes and the patient journey, how do you think about coordinating your care with the other providers for that specific patient?
Yeah, good point, Hirsch. I think that's been a real challenge in the field, from a granular level where patients travel from different providers, or if they're in a hospital transitioning, et cetera, all the way down to a very finer detail where they're working within a company and the patient sees Joe PT today, and then Joe PT's out the next day and they see another therapist. So I think it's funny. I really do feel that the documentation platform is a very important part of that. You hear it all the time. There's some therapists that write poor notes. There's some therapists that write too detailed notes without instruction. There's therapists that don't even write notes sometimes. You hear stories, right? And not within my company. I just saw a post the other day. It was actually yesterday where a therapist is like, I don't get any notes from the senior therapist. And like, I don't know what to do, and I'm like, well, go, I wrote back. I'm like, go talk to them. Go talk to them. I mean, can you talk to a therapist every day face to face? That's been the break there. So I think the technology, the ability to communicate through platforms that's easier to communicate. Communication has been our huge gradient change in the last 10 years. I mean, across the board, from social media all the way through to technology that's being used. And that is a big advantage for a clinical driven model like ours, where we need to interact with a patient and make decisions right there. So I think utilizing technology to help drive that is going to be a big game changer for us in inter office communication. I think that gathering therapists around a clinical platform where they're focusing on some different things that they could gear their minds on and not worry about their notes being done, not worry about if the billing is correct, not worrying about, things like that, like focusing a bit more on clinical focus and management, I think, and possibly even marketing. I think those three facets are places where therapists should focus their attention on, and they will save time with documentation not being such a burden as they go forward.
Got it. And in terms of the impact that you have to patients, what are good practices or things that you've recommended your PTs do to ensure that the patients are seeing that value as well? I think we touched on that a little bit earlier, but want to hear more there.
Yeah. We try always to, I know it sounds kind of goofy in some ways. Like Google reviews are an important place where a provider is working with a patient and they're getting feedback from the patient always. And of course, we always educate them to continue to have that dialogue with their patient as they go through each of the events of care, and, with documentation review and communication about treating patients and length of care and plans of cares. Therapists have to be a little more introspective about how they decide how many visits they're going to have. So they'll ask their patients questions. But on the Google review side, it's like little things like that. We're asking for a review and or asking for feedback from the patient in a platform like that is very enriching for a therapist to see that a patient is taking the time out to comment about how well they've done. Surveys probably could be that way, but I think Google reviews are a very simple place where you can kind of have that experience. And, obviously in a therapeutic environment, like a clinic, for example, in the home care environment that we have, therapists is spending an hour with the patient. They have plenty of time to adjudicate time to talk about different things, probably a lot of things. In the clinic setting, obviously making sure the facility is set up where there's resources within the facility that it makes it easier for the patient to be relaxed and discussing these things. That could go from just busyness, volume, to proper setup, to equipment, etc. But we really do encourage the therapists to be autonomous providers, right? Because they are a doctoring profession now. We are a doctoring profession now, and they should be able to kind of make decisions. So there's a lot of questions that go into asking from our end, from management, asking the provider what their thought process is, which then translates to them talking to their patients in a better or more articulate way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I love that like tangible idea of like what can providers ask for. If there was one piece of advice that someone had given to you when you started your first clinic, right? And now you're a much bigger presence now, what would it be, or what would you tell yourself or someone that's starting a clinic or group today?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are a lot of facets to opening a clinic. I think the one thing I've always kind of hung my hat on is just really learning from the right people. You should look for peers that have background, experience, knowledge. Ask them questions. Have they been in private practice? Have they managed 20 people, 100 people? What are some of the challenges in running 150 people? You should try to, it's the same reason I sit down with you and ask you questions about what you do, right? Because you have such exposure and experience to it through your experience in your career. And there's a lot to gain from that. And the tough part about that is getting those people. And the default would be people that are not able to give you that information, right? So yeah, you know what? If you need to borrow a couple bucks from your dad to pay somebody, $50, $100 or $300 for their hour to consult them while you're on a young journey toward opening a clinic, I would do so. It's not the cheapest way to go, but if you want to contact somebody who has a lot of data and experience in the field and start talking to them about what it took, the path they took, what to avoid, what not to, what to do, what not to do, the whole thing. I think those go a long way. And then having consistent dialogue with them. You don't have to have a mentor always, like one person, but you should have a collection of people that can give you guidance. And I find that in the field, there are people that have different motivations that have driven them to the point where they're at to open their own practice. And a lot of that comes from different places. It could be their family, it could be their cousins, it could be their neighbor, it could be just somebody they saw online, or just some idea they got. But you got to back all that stuff up with really qualified data and take pen and paper to it. Like, you just need to get really organic with your data. Write it down. Just live it, re-look at it, ask further questions from it. Everybody's always taking notes and doing these things. It's good to reflect back on the notes and find out what really are the key pieces that you still don't know.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Hey, Vinod, thanks so much for the time. I enjoyed the conversation. Awesome insight, and excited to work closer with you.
Same here, Hirsch. Thanks so much, man. It was super awesome.